She'd protected his children from a predator he never saw. Her reward? Being thrown out in the rain. But the twins remembered everything, and their words would shatter the most dangerous man in Seoul. The Navy maid's dress hit the rain-soaked marble with a wet slap that seemed to echo through the entire courtyard. Nola Adeyemi never imagined that after 3 years of loving Min Seo and Ji Woo like her own, she would be cast out without so much as an explanation. Her dress was still damp at the hem, speckled with mud from the garden she'd been pruning just that morning. They'd wanted sunflowers for their mother's memorial. She clutched her small travel bag tighter, desperately fighting the urge to look back at the only place that had felt like home in a foreign country. Behind her, Kang Jae-min stood at the top of the steps in his tailored black suit, white shirt pristine, face carved from stone. The kind of calm that made powerful men nervous. The kind of silence that preceded disappearances. He wouldn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed straight ahead, past her, through her as if she'd already stopped existing. But it was the sound that tore through the evening air. 2 small voices, raw with panic and heartbreak, screaming from behind the guards. "No! Daddy, no! Don't send her away!" Min Seo and Ji Woo, still in their school uniforms, broke free and ran down the steps, their little hands outstretched, fingers grasping desperately at Nola's dress. "Please, Daddy, please!" Jaemin caught them back with one quiet command to the guards, his face unreadable, unmoved. The iron gates began to close. The twins' screams grew more desperate, not just crying, but pleading. And Nola walked away from the only family she'd known in 3 years, not knowing that what those little girls had witnessed in the hallways at night would change everything. Hello, my friends. Thanks for joining me on this fascinating story. Before we continue, please kindly help subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where you are watching from and what time it's at your end. Now let's continue with our story. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Kang mansion, casting geometric shadows across the polished floors. Nola Adeyemi knelt in the garden, her gloved hands carefully pruning the rose bushes, while the twins practiced piano inside. She could hear the hesitant notes of their charity luncheon piece drifting through the open window. They were nervous about performing without their mother there to watch. She smiled, brushing soil from her apron, not noticing the sleek black car that pulled up to the side entrance, not seeing the man who stepped out, temporary driver, recently hired, always polite, watching her through dark sunglasses. Inside, Jaemin's cousin stood in the study doorway, his expensive suit slightly rumpled, his expression calculated. He'd been handling internal matters for the family for years, and his eyes swept across the household with the practiced assessment of someone looking for leverage. Those eyes landed on Nola through the window. On the way, the twins ran to her when they took their break, laughing as she tucked flowers behind their ears. Basen too close, too trusted, too aware of things she shouldn't be. "She's been with them for how long?" the cousin asked the head of security. 3 years, clean record. The children are attached. The cousin's manicured fingers drummed against his phone. "We'll need to handle this carefully." Meanwhile, in the garden, Nola was teaching Min Seo how to deadhead roses without pricking her fingers. She didn't see the driver circling the perimeter, didn't notice how he paused near the garage, watching, testing boundaries. She was too focused on Ji Woo's question, "Will you really sit in the front row tomorrow?" "I promise," Nola said, squeezing the little girl's hand. She had no idea that promise would be impossible to keep, or that the man watching from the shadows had already been caught doing something unforgivable. And something Nola had interrupted 2 nights ago in the hallway near the children's wing. Something she'd reported to no one, because she'd been warned by the cousin himself. "If you value your position here, you'll forget what you saw." But Nola hadn't forgotten. She'd started checking the windows twice, staying closer to the girls, sleeping lighter, and that vigilance had made her dangerous. By noon, the house had changed. Voices lowered behind closed doors. Security doubled at the gates. And when Nola was summoned to the study, her heart already sinking, she wiped her hands on her apron and walked in calmly. She had never been afraid of Jaemin, not because he wasn't dangerous, but because he had never been cruel to her, until that day. "You will leave the house today." The words hung in the air like smoke after gunfire. Nola blinked, her hands still clasped in front of her apron. "Sir?" Jamin didn't look up from the papers on his desk. His pen moved across the signature line with mechanical precision. "You're no longer needed." The study suddenly felt smaller, colder. Nola's chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "Have I done something wrong?" Silence. She tried again, carefully. "I would like to understand. If I've made a mistake with the children, this is not a discussion." That was all. No explanation. No severance meeting. No forwarding address for references. Just dismissal, delivered like he was ordering coffee. Nola stood there for 3 more seconds, waiting for something, anything, that might make sense of this. But Jamin had already moved to the next document, his face as impassive as marble. She turned and walked out. 3 weeks earlier, everything had been different. Nola had woken at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before her alarm, the way she always did. The mansion was still dark, silent except for the hum of security systems and the distant rumble of Seoul waking up beyond the gates. She'd started her day the same way she had for 3 years, checking the twins' room. Min Seo slept curled like a comma, one small fist clutching the edge of her blanket. Ji-woo sprawled across her bed like a starfish, her stuffed rabbit abandoned on the floor. Nola picked it up, tucked it back beside her, and pulled the blanket higher over both girls. They looked peaceful, safe. That was all that mattered. By 7, she'd braided Ji-woo's hair too tight, and by accident, and Min Seo had laughed so hard she spilled orange juice across the kitchen counter. They'd eaten toast shaped like stars because Nola had found a cookie cutter at the market and thought it might make them smile. It did. "Thank the cook," Nola reminded them gently as they finished. "Thank you, Mrs. Choi," they chorused. Manners weren't just politeness to Nola. They were surviving. In a house where power shifted like shadows, where men spoke in codes and doors closed without warning, children needed to know how to navigate danger without ever looking afraid. After breakfast came piano practice. The charity luncheon was in 2 days, and the twins were nervous. Their mother had always sat in the front row at these events, beaming with pride even when they missed notes. But their mother had been gone for 2 years now. And public performances still felt like standing on a stage with no net. "You'll do beautifully," Nola said, sitting beside them on the bench, "and I'll be right there in the front row." Min Seo looked up at her, eyes wide. "You promise?" "I promise." Ji-woo leaned against her shoulder. "You won't leave like Mama did?" Nola's throat tightened. She wrapped her arms around both of them, pressing a kiss to the top of Ji-woo's head. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart." They believed her. God help her. They believed her. That afternoon, while the twins were at their tutoring session, Nola noticed him. The new driver. He stood near the garage, ostensibly polishing the Mercedes, but his eyes tracked movement across the courtyard, watched the guards change shifts, studied the security camera's blind spots. And something about him made Nola's instincts flare. She'd seen dangerous men before. This house was full of them. But they didn't usually watch children the way he did. Like he was calculating distance, access, opportunity. When Min Seo wandered too close to the garage later that week, curious about the cars, he grabbed her wrist. Not hard, not yet, but firm enough to stop her. Possessive enough to send ice down Nola's spine. "She's not allowed near the vehicles," Nola said, her voice sharper than she'd intended. The driver smiled, slow, deliberate. Of course, just keeping her safe. Nola took Min Seo's hand and led her away, her heart hammering. That night she checked the windows twice before bed, tested the locks on the twins' door, stayed awake listening for footsteps in the hallway. The next morning, Jamin's cousin found her in the laundry room. "You seem nervous," he said casually, leaning against the door frame. Nola folded a towel with careful precision. "Just attentive, sir." "About the new driver?" She hesitated, then nodded. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "If you value your position here, Nola, you'll forget what you saw. The girls need stability, not drama." It wasn't a suggestion. Nola smoothed the towel. "Of course, sir." But she didn't forget. She just stayed silent. For the children's peace, she told herself, for their safety. 3 weeks later, when the head of security appeared at the nursery door and said, "Mr. Kang requests your presence in the study," Nola knew. She wiped her hands on her apron, smoothed the fabric, and walked toward the end. The study smelled like leather and expensive tobacco, though Jaemin didn't smoke. It was the smell of power. Inherited, cultivated, absolute. Nola stood with her hands folded, waiting for him to speak again. To offer something. Anything. He didn't. Instead, he slid a manila envelope across the mahogany desk. "Your phone. Your final payment. A car will take you to wherever you need to go." Nola stared at the envelope. 3 years condensed into manila and cash. "May I ask?" she started. "No." The word was final. Not angry, not defensive, just complete. She tried a different approach. "The twins, may I say goodbye?" "That won't be necessary. They'll ask questions. They'll be told you had a family emergency." His pen moved to the next document. The conversation was over in his mind, but Nola didn't move. "Sir, if someone has accused me of something, I deserve to know what it is. If I violated my contract, you haven't. Then why? Because I said so. 4 words, delivered without inflection, without cruelty even. Just a statement of fact. This was how power worked, Nola realized. Not with violence or rage, but with the quiet erasure of people who no longer fit the narrative. No trial, no defense, just gone. She looked at him, really looked, searching for something human beneath the expensive suit and practiced indifference. Nothing. "How long do I have?" she asked quietly. "Your things are being packed now. The car leaves in 30 minutes. 30 minutes to disappear from 3 years of a life." Nola picked up the envelope. Her hands didn't shake, though everything inside her wanted to collapse. "The charity luncheon is tomorrow. I promised the girls I'd be there. We'll manage." Of course they would. People like Jaemin always managed. It was people like her, invisible, interchangeable, who broke against the machinery of wealth and power. She turned toward the door. "Miss Adeyemi." She stopped, a flicker of hope catching in her chest. Maybe. "Leave your keycard on the table by the door." The hope died. Her room had already been stripped. Nola stood in the doorway, staring at the empty closet, the bare mattress, the single suitcase sitting on the floor like a coffin. Someone had packed her things with clinical efficiency. Clothes folded, toiletries wrapped, personal items she'd collected over 3 years reduced to organized compartments. They'd even removed the photos from her bulletin board, the ones of the twins at the park, and Min Seo's finger-painted card that said, "Best Nola ever." Ji Woo's carefully written note, "Thank you for teaching me to be brave." All of it. Gone. Packed by strangers. Handled by people who didn't know that the faded cookbook had been her grandmother's, or that the chipped coffee mug was from her first morning in Seoul, or that the blue scarf was the last gift the twins' mother had given her before she died. "We thought you'd want everything ready," the housekeeper said from the doorway. She wouldn't meet Nola's eyes. Mr. Kang was very clear about timing. Translation: "We were ordered to erase you quickly." Nola opened her suitcase. Everything was there. Everything was wrong. Her contract sat on top, unsigned, invalid, as if 3 years of her life had been a handshake agreement that could be dissolved with a nod. No severance signature. No reference letter. No acknowledgement that she'd sacrificed birthdays, holidays, her own life to raise someone else's children. Just nothing. She heard laughter then, distant but clear. The twins. They were downstairs, probably in the playroom, giggling over something innocent and bright. They had no idea their world was about to shatter. No idea that the woman who tucked them in every night, who wiped their tears and celebrated their small victories, was being systematically erased from their lives. They were laughing, and she would be gone before they could ask why. Nola closed the suitcase. Her hands were steady now, but something inside her had shifted. Not anger, not yet, but understanding. She wasn't being fired for incompetence or theft or betrayal. She was being removed because she'd seen something, know something. And stood between the twins and something ugly. And in Kang Jae-min's world, protection without permission was a crime, punishable by silence. The car waited in the circular driveway, engine running. Rain had started to fall, soft and persistent, turning the marble steps dark and slick. Nola descended slowly, her suitcase in one hand, that unopened envelope in the other. Behind her, the mansion loomed. White stone, tall columns, windows that reflected nothing back. Ahead, the gates were already opening, and then she heard them, running footsteps, small voices screaming her name. The twins had found out. The dining room had never felt this large before. Jae-min sat at the head of the table, his suit jacket draped over the chair back, his plate untouched. Across from him, the twins stared at their food like it was a foreign language they'd forgotten how to read. Roasted chicken, glazed vegetables, rice molded into perfect spheres. None of it mattered. "Eat," Jae-min said. Neither girl moved. Min Seo pushed her plate forward, the porcelain scraping against wood. Ji-woo folded her arms across her chest, jaw set in a way that reminded him painfully of her mother. "Where is she?" Ji-woo asked. It was the fourth time she'd asked. Jae-min still hadn't answered. The housekeeper hovered near the doorway, uncertain. The guard stationed outside pretended not to hear. Even the cook had retreated to the kitchen, in the air too thick with tension to breathe. "You need to eat." Jae-min tried again, his voice flat. "Where is Nola?" Ji-woo enunciated each word like a weapon. "She had to leave." "Why?" "That's not your concern." Min Seo stood up. Slowly, deliberately, she climbed onto her chair so she could look her father in the eye. At 7 years old, she barely reached his height, even standing, but her voice carried. "She didn't say goodbye." The room froze. "She always says goodbye," Min Seo continued, her small voice trembling but steady. "Even when she goes to the market. Even when she's mad at us for making a mess. Even when she cries in the laundry room and thinks we don't see." Jae-min's jaw tightened. "She promised she'd sit in the front row tomorrow," Ji-woo whispered. "At the luncheon. She promised, Daddy." "I'll be there," he said. "It's not the same." No, it wasn't. Min Seo climbed down from her chair and walked out of the dining room, her sister following close behind. They left their plates untouched, their father sitting alone in a house that suddenly felt hollow. The guards exchanged glances. Jae-min stared at the empty chair where Nola used to sit during meals, not at the table, but nearby, just in case they needed something. She'd always insisted on that, always watching, always ready. He'd never questioned why she felt the need to be so vigilant. He should have. That night, the twins didn't sleep. Jae-min checked on them at midnight, pushing their door open quietly. They lay in their beds, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. "Go to sleep," he said. "We're not tired," Min Seo lied. He stood there for a moment, uncertain. He'd faced down rival bosses, had negotiated treaties with men who'd killed for less, ordered operations that moved millions across borders. But he had no idea how to comfort his own daughters. He closed the door. In the darkness, the twins whispered. "Do you remember when those men were fighting downstairs?" Ji-woo asked. "The loud ones, with guns." Nola covered my ears, Min Seo said quietly. "She sang that song, the one about stars." She was shaking. "I know." Silence stretched between them, filled with memories adults thought they'd forgotten. The night Ji-woo had nightmares about her mother drowning, and Nola had slept on the floor beside her bed, her hands stretched up to hold Ji-woo's through the bars. The time Min Seo got sick, and Nola stayed up for 3 days straight, checking her temperature every hour, whispering prayers in a language they didn't understand. And the way Nola always checked the windows before bed, not once, twice, sometimes 3 times. "Why did she check the windows?" Min Seo asked. "I don't know." She was scared, Ji-woo said slowly, the realization dawning. Not for herself, for us. Of who? Neither answered. But they both remembered now. Pieces fitting together in the dark. The new driver who smiled too much. The way Nola always positioned herself between them and strangers. How she'd started walking them to their tutoring sessions instead of letting the staff do it. The night they'd heard her voice in the hallway, sharp and firm, "Don't touch her." They'd peeked out of their room and seen Nola standing in front of the driver, her body blocking Min-seo from view, her hands shaking, but her voice steady. "If you ever lay a hand on these children again, I don't care who you work for." The driver laughed. Low, threatening. Nola hadn't moved. The next day, she'd told them not to go near the garage, not to talk to the driver, not to tell anyone about what they'd seen. "It'll just worry your father," she'd said, "and he has so much to worry about already." They'd kept the secret because she asked them to, because they trusted her, because she'd always protected them, even when it meant standing alone. "She was scared for us," Ji-woo whispered again. "And Daddy sent her away," Min-seo finished. In the silence that followed, something shifted. Not anger, they were too young for that, but awareness. Their father, the most powerful man they knew, the one everyone feared and obeyed, he'd failed. And Nola had paid the price. Downstairs, Jaemin sat in his study, staring at the security reports he should have read weeks ago. Everything was in order, they said. No incidents, no concerns. Everything was fine. But his daughters weren't eating, and the house felt wrong. Jaemin found them in the playroom the next morning, surrounded by drawings. He'd come to tell them to get ready for the luncheon, the one Nola had promised to attend, the one they'd now have to face alone. But the words died in his throat when he saw what covered the floor. Paper, everywhere. Dozens of drawings, all depicting the same scene. A figure in navy blue, Nola, unmistakable even in crayon, standing with her arms spread wide. Behind her, two smaller figures holding hands, and in front of her, a dark shape, faceless, looming, over and over and over. The same image, rendered in different colors, different angles, but always the same composition. Nola as a wall between his daughters and something formless and terrible. "What is this?" he asked quietly. Min-seo looked up from her current drawing, in purple crayon gripped tight in her small fist. "It's what we remember." Jaemin crouched down, picking up one of the papers. The dark shape had no features, just mass and menace. But Nola's figure was detailed. Buttons on her dress, the braid in her hair, her hands positioned like she was physically holding something back. "Remember from when?" "From when she protected us," Ji-woo said simply. His blood went cold. "Protected you from what?" The twins exchanged a glance. That silent communication children develop when they're not sure if adults will believe them. "She told us not to tell," Min-seo said carefully. "Tell what?" Ji-woo set down her crayon. Her eyes met his. Too old, too knowing for a 7-year-old. "She said if anything ever happened to her, we should tell you about the man in the hallway." The playroom seemed to tilt. Jaemin set the drawing down with careful precision, his hands steady even as his pulse hammered. "What man?" "The driver," Min-seo said. "The new one, with the dark glasses." "He comes at night," Ji-woo added, "when you're not home." Every instinct in Jaemin's body went on alert. He kept his voice level, gentle. "Tell me everything." They did. In fragments, the way children tell stories, jumping between details, backtracking, correcting each other. But the picture they painted was devastatingly clear. A temporary driver, hired 3 months ago. Always polite, always watching. Hovering near the playroom during tutoring sessions. Appearing in hallways where he had no reason to be. Following the twins with his eyes, in a way that made their skin prickle, even if they didn't understand why. "He grabbed me once," Min-seo said quietly. "I'm near the garage. I wanted to see the cars." Jaemin's jaw clenched. Where was security? Changing shifts. He knew. He waited. What happened? Nola came. Ji-woo's voice was small. "She was shaking, Daddy. I'd never seen her scared before." Min-seo nodded. "She told him never to touch us. She said..." The little girl paused, trying to remember the exact words. She said, "I don't care who you work for. You stay away from these children." Jaemin went very still. What did he say? He laughed, said she was just the maid, that she should remember her place. And then? "She didn't move," Min-seo whispered. "She stood right there between us until he left. Then she made us promise not to tell anyone." "Why?" The question came out harsher than intended. Jiwoo looked down at her drawing. She said it would just worry you, and that you had important things to deal with, that she could handle it. So Nola had carried this alone, stood between his children and a predator, shaking with fear, and never said a word because she thought she was protecting him from worry, or because she'd tried to report it and been told to stay quiet. The realization hit him like cold water. "Did Nola tell anyone else?" he asked carefully. Min Seo nodded. "I heard her talking to your cousin once, in the laundry room. She said she was worried about the driver." "What did my cousin say?" "I couldn't hear everything, but Nola looked sad after. She cried that night, in her room." Jae-min stood slowly, his mind racing through implications. A temporary driver with too much access. His cousin handling internal matters. Nola dismissed without explanation the day after confronting a threat. No report had ever reached his desk, no incident file, no complaint. Just Nola, standing alone between his children and danger, then erased for the crime of protecting what he'd failed to see. "The man in the hallway," he said quietly. "Is he still here?" The twins shook their heads. "We haven't seen him since Nola left." Of course not. The problem had been eliminated, just not the one Jae-min thought. He pulled out his phone, dialing security. "Pull all blind spot footage from the past 3 months. Personal hallways, garage access, anywhere cameras don't cover standard routes." "Sir?" "Now." He ended the call and looked at his daughters. They watched him with heartbreaking hope, waiting to see if he'd finally understand what they'd been trying to tell him. "I'm sorry," he said. The words felt inadequate, worthless. "Are you going to bring her back?" Min Seo asked. Jaemin looked at the drawings scattered across the floor. Evidence of vigilance his children shouldn't have needed. Protection from a threat he should have prevented. Yes. If she'd still have them. The footage came in fragments. Jaemin sat in the security office watching grainy black and white clips from cameras positioned at angles meant to catch what the main system missed. Blind spots, corners, the spaces between official oversight. The timestamps told their own story. October 17th, 11:47 p.m. The driver crossing the west hallway, not toward the garage or staff quarters, but toward the residential wing, the children's wing. He paused outside their door, listened, tested the handle, locked. He moved on. October 23rd, 2:14 a.m., same hallway. This time he made it 3 steps closer before a door opened down the corridor. Nola, in her nightgown, stepping out like she'd been waiting. The driver stopped. They spoke. No audio, but body language clear. His posture is aggressive, hers defensive but firm. She positioned herself between him and the twins' door. He left. She stayed in the hallway for another hour, sitting on the floor outside their room. Jae-min's hands tightened on the desk edge. October 29th, 3:52 p.m. garage access. Min Seo wandered near the vehicles, curious, unattended. The driver approached. His hand reached for her wrist. Then Nola, running, pulled Min Seo behind her. The confrontation was brief, silent on the footage. But even without sound, Jaemin could see Nola shaking, could see the driver's smile, could see the moment she squared her shoulders and refused to back down. The security chief cleared his throat. "There's more." November 3rd, 10:15 p.m. The study hallway. The driver handing something to Jaemin's cousin, a thick envelope. The cousin opening it, rifling through cash, nodding. They spoke for 2 minutes. The cousin made a phone call, gestured toward the residential wing. The driver smiled. November 4th, 9:30 a.m. Nola in the laundry room, the cousin entering. A conversation lasting 7 minutes. Nola's posture shifting from concerned to defensive to defeated. She'd reported it and been silenced. November 4th, 7:47 p.m. Nola being summoned to the study. 20 minutes later, walking out with an envelope. Her face was blank, her hands are steady, already erased. Jae-min sat back in his chair, the screens frozen on that final image of Nola walking away. "The driver's employment file," he said quietly. The security chief slid it across the desk. "Hired through a temp agency. Recommended by—" "My cousin." "Yes, sir." "Of course. Jaemin opened the file. Background check, minimal, references, vague. Security clearance, approved by family authority, bypassing standard protocols. A man brought in through the back door, given access to his home, his children. And when Nola noticed, she'd been removed. Not because she'd done anything wrong, because she'd done everything right. Where are they now? Jaemin asked. The driver left the country on November 5th. Thailand, then disappeared. Your cousin? The chief hesitated. The last confirmed location was Busan. He's not responding to calls. Running, both of them. They knew what happened to people who endangered the family. But Jaemin felt no satisfaction in their fear. No urge for the retribution that should have come naturally. Just hollow, aching awareness that his power, the same power that could make men disappear, had protected the wrong people. He had punished the one person who'd stood between his children and harm. Let them go, he said. The security chief blinked. Sir? I said let them go. Jaemin stood, closing the file. They're already gone. What I want doesn't matter now. Your cousin has access to family accounts. Freeze them. Remove his clearances. But don't chase him. May I ask why? Because violence wouldn't undo this. Wouldn't bring back the 3 months his daughter spent afraid. Wouldn't erase the fact that Nola had fought alone while he'd remained willfully blind. Wouldn't change the truth that he'd failed before the crime was even committed. Because I'm not angry at them, Jaemin said quietly. I'm angry at myself. He found the twins in the playroom, still surrounded by their drawings. They looked up when he entered, the hope and fear warring in their faces. Jaemin sat down on the floor beside them, not on a chair, not standing above them, on the floor, at their level, in the wreckage of what his neglect had caused. You were right, he said, about everything. Min Seo's lip trembled. Nola tried to tell someone. She tried to protect you, and I... The words stuck in his throat. I didn't listen. We told you, Min Seo sobbed, crawling into his lap. We told you she didn't say goodbye. Jiwoo followed, pressing her face into his jacket, small shoulders shaking. You didn't listen, she whispered. Not angry, just truthful. Jaemin wrapped his arms around both of them, feeling the weight of their grief, their fear, their broken trust. For the first time in his life, Kang Jaemin understood something power could not fix. He had failed before the crime. Not because he wasn't strong enough or smart enough or ruthless enough, but because he hadn't believed the people who mattered most. And now he had to find a way to earn back what he'd destroyed, if it wasn't already too late. The twins cried themselves quiet in his arms. When they finally pulled away, their faces were blotchy and red, their breathing still uneven. Jaemin tried to smooth Min Seo's hair the way Nola used to, but his hand felt clumsy, uncertain. She flinched. It was small, instinctive, but it cut deeper than any knife. I'm going to bring her back, he said. A promise, a command to the universe. Jiwoo looked at him with those two old eyes. What if she doesn't want to come? The question hung in the air like smoke. Jaemin had ordered men to return from exile, had commanded loyalty, obedience, fear. He'd built an empire on the assumption that what he wanted, he could take. But this? Then she doesn't come, he said quietly. Min Seo's head snapped up. But we need her. I know. So make her come back. You can make anyone do anything. The childish faith in his power was devastating. Jaemin shook his head. Not this time. Why not? Because force was what had broken this. Authority was what had failed them. Power was what had protected a predator and punished a protector. He couldn't fix this with the same tools that had caused it. Because I don't have the right, he said. I sent her away without listening, without believing her, without protecting either of you when that was the only job that mattered. Jiwoo crossed her arms. We told you she didn't say goodbye. You did. We told you she promised to come to the luncheon. You did. We told you something was wrong. Her voice cracked. And you didn't listen. No, Jaemin said. I didn't. He didn't offer excuses. It didn't explain about the business crisis that week, or the security briefings that had consumed his attention, or the 1,000 other things that had seemed more important than his daughter's grief. Because none of it mattered. They'd told him the truth, and he'd chosen not to hear it. "I'm sorry," he said. The words felt inadequate. Worthless currency for a debt he couldn't repay. "I failed you both, and I failed Nola, and I don't know if I can fix this." Minseo wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Nola always knew how to fix things. She did. She said sorry when she made mistakes. "I'm saying sorry now." "She meant it, though," Jiwoo said quietly. "She didn't just say words. She changed." The truth of it settled in his chest like a stone. An apology was worthless without transformation. Words were nothing without proof. "You're right," Jaemin said. "So I'm going to find her. I'm going to apologize. And then I'm going to ask her what she needs from me to make this right. Not tell her, not order her. Ask." "What if she says no?" Minseo whispered. "Then I'll accept that." Even though it would destroy his daughters, even though it would leave a hole in this house that no amount of power or money could fill. Because that's what respect meant. Believing someone when they told you the truth, even if the truth was that you'd broken something beyond repair. "Can we come?" Jiwoo asked. Jaemin shook his head. "Not yet. This is something I need to do alone first." "Why?" "Because she doesn't owe you an answer. She doesn't owe me anything, and if she comes back, it needs to be because she chooses to. Not because 2 little girls she loves asked her to, and she couldn't say no." It was perhaps the hardest truth he'd ever spoken. The twins needed Nola, desperately, completely. But love without autonomy was just another form of control. And he'd controlled enough. He found her location through the payment records. The final envelope he'd given her had been cashed at a bank near the southern bus terminal. From there, it was simple: security footage, transportation logs, the kind of tracking that had always been effortless when you had resources. But standing in his study with the address written on a piece of paper, Jaemin felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. He could send a car, could dispatch his head of security with a formal request, could orchestrate this like any other business transaction, efficient, professional, controlled. But that's what had failed before, so instead, he folded the paper into his pocket, walked past his security detail, and left the mansion alone. No guards, no driver, no armor of authority. Just a man who'd made a terrible mistake, walking into the rain to face someone who had every right to shut the door in his face. The gates closed behind him, and for the first time in his life, Kang Jae-min understood what it meant to have power and no way to use it. The bus terminal smelled like diesel and rain. Nola sat on a plastic bench near Gate 7, her small suitcase at her feet, a ticket to Busan clutched in her hand. The departure board flickered above her. 20 minutes until boarding. 20 minutes until she left Seoul, left Korea, left everything she'd built here behind. She should have felt relief. Instead, she just felt empty. She heard them before she saw them. "Nola!" 2 small voices, raw with desperation, cutting through the terminal noise. Nola's head snapped up just as Minseo and Jiwoo crashed into her, nearly knocking her off the bench. Their arms wrapped around her waist, her neck, anywhere they could reach, holding on like she might vanish if they let go. "You're here," Minseo sobbed into her shoulder. "You're real." Nola's hands came up instinctively, pulling them close, her own tears falling before she could stop them. I'm here, sweethearts." "We thought..." Jiwoo couldn't finish, just pressed her face harder into Nola's chest. Over their heads, Nola saw him. Kang Jae-min stood 10 feet away, soaked from the rain, no jacket, no guards, no armor of authority, just a man holding his own shame. Their eyes met. Nola's arms tightened around the twins, protective even now. "Girls," Jae-min said quietly, "give us a moment." "No," Minseo said fiercely. "You'll make her leave again." "I won't. I promise." Jiwoo looked up at Nola, searching her face. "Do you want us to stay?" Nola's throat tightened. Even now, even after everything, they were thinking of her, asking what she needed. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'll be right here." Reluctantly, the twins stepped back, and hovering close enough to intervene if needed. Jae-min moved closer. Not too close. Respectful of the space Nola might need. "I didn't send you away because you were wrong," he said. The same words he'd practiced 100 times in the car, but they felt inadequate now. "I sent you away because you were right." Nola said nothing. "You protected my children when I didn't," he continued. "You saw danger I was too blind to notice. You stood alone against something I should have eliminated before it ever got close to them." Still nothing. "And when you tried to tell someone, you were silenced, threatened, then erased." His voice cracked slightly. "Not because you failed, because I did." Nola looked down at her hands, at the ticket that represented freedom from this pain, this place, these people who'd used her loyalty like currency and discarded her when she became inconvenient. "I know what you're going to say," Jae-min said quietly. "That you're sorry, that it won't happen again, that you'll make it right." He shook his head. "I can't promise any of that because words mean nothing, not after what I did." Nola's eyes lifted to his. "So I'm not asking you to forgive me," he continued. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you what you need for this to be bearable. What conditions would make you willing to come back? Not for me, but for them." He gestured toward the twins who watched with desperate hope. "Because they need you, and I can't—" His jaw clenched. "I can't order this fixed. I can't force you to care about them again. I can only ask what it would take." The terminal announcements echoed overhead. "Gate 7, now boarding." Nola looked at her ticket, then at the twins, then back at Jae-min. "I never stopped caring about them," she said finally. Her voice was steady, but hurt ran underneath it like a current. "That was never the problem." "I know." "The problem was that caring meant nothing, that I had no voice, no authority, no respect." She stood, facing him fully. "I was dismissed like hired help because that's all I was to you, replaceable." "You're not—" "Let me finish." Her tone was sharp enough to stop him cold. "If I come back, things change. Not your promises, actual change. Tell me what you need." "Respect," Nola said. "Not deference, not politeness. Real respect. When I tell you something is wrong, you listen. When I raise concerns about the children's safety, you investigate. When I say someone shouldn't have access to them, that person loses access." Jae-min nodded. "Done." "I'm not finished." She stepped closer. "I want authority over their care. Medical decisions, education, daily routines, those go through me first. Not staff, not family members, me." "Yes." "And if I ever feel unsafe or dismissed again, I walk. No explanations required, no notice period. I just go, and you don't follow." The last condition landed like a stone. Jae-min could have negotiated, could have asked for compromise, for middle ground, for some way to retain control. Instead, he said, "Agreed." Nola studied his face, searching for the catch, the manipulation, the hidden clause that would let him take it all back later. She found nothing but exhaustion and genuine regret. "Why should I believe you?" she asked quietly. "You shouldn't." He glanced at the twins. "But they will hold me accountable, and I'll hold myself accountable, because I can't survive failing them again." Nola looked down at Min Seo and Ji-woo. They stared back, hopeful but cautious, waiting to see what she'd choose. She thought about Busan, about starting over somewhere safe and quiet, about never having to check windows twice or stand between children and darkness. Then she thought about Ji-woo's nightmares, Min Seo's laugh, the way they fit perfectly under her arms when they hugged. She crumpled the ticket in her hand. "I'll come back," she said, "but on my terms." "They're the only terms that matter," Jae-min replied. The mansion looked different when Nola returned. Not physically. Same white stone, same tall columns, same iron gates. But the air had shifted. Security protocols had been overhauled. New faces on the detail. Background checks triple verified. And waiting at the door, Jae-min, holding a key card, not handing it to a staff member to deliver, holding it himself. "Your room is exactly as you left it," he said quietly. If you want a different one, just say so. Nola took the key card. This is fine. The twins hovered behind him, practically vibrating with the effort of not launching themselves at her again. They'd been coached, clearly. Give her space. Let her settle. Can we help you unpack? Ji-woo asked carefully. Nola smiled. Small, genuine. I'd like that. Staff treaded carefully around Nola, unsure of her new position in the household hierarchy. She wasn't just the maid anymore, but she wasn't family either. She existed in some undefined space that made people nervous. Jae-min solved it the only way that mattered, with clarity. Miss Adayemi has full authority over the children's welfare, he announced at the staff meeting. Medical, educational, security. Her decisions are final. If she raises a concern, it comes directly to me. No intermediaries, no delays. He looked around the room. Is that understood? Everyone nodded. Nola stood in the doorway, arms crossed, waiting to see if it was performance or policy. Time would tell. The changes came slowly, small things that accumulated into proof. When Nola mentioned the twins seemed tired, their tutoring schedule was adjusted within hours. No argument. No justification required. When she suggested the new driver undergo additional vetting, Jae-min had him replaced by end of day. When she asked for locks on the inside of the twins' bedroom doors, the kind only they could control, he had them installed by morning. So they always have choice, Nola had said, even about who comes into their space. Jae-min hadn't questioned it, hadn't explained that the house was already secure, that such measures were redundant. He just nodded and made it happen. But Nola didn't thank him, didn't forgive him, just watched, waited, catalogued every action against the weight of past failures. Trust wasn't given. It was earned in inches. 2 weeks after her return, the twins had their first nightmare. Ji-woo woke screaming, and Nola was there within seconds, gathering her close, and whispering the song about stars. Jae-min appeared in the doorway, concern etched into his face. Is she? She's fine, Nola said firmly. Just a bad dream. He hesitated, clearly wanting to help, to fix, to control the situation into resolution. You can go, Nola added, not unkindly, just clearly. Jae-min looked at his daughter, then at Nola, then nodded and left. Later, when Ji-woo had fallen back asleep, Nola found him sitting in the hallway outside their room. What are you doing? She asked. I don't know, he admitted. I couldn't go back to my room, not while she was upset. Nola studied him for a long moment, then sat down against the opposite wall. They stayed there in silence until dawn, not together, but parallel. Two people learning how to share the burden of protection instead of fighting over who controlled it. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. The charity luncheon arrived on a gray Saturday. The twins were nervous, their small hands trembling, as they adjusted their matching dresses in the car. You'll do beautifully, Nola said, the same words she'd said weeks ago in a different lifetime. You'll really be there? Min Seo asked. In the front row? I promise. This time she kept it. The venue was elegant. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths. Seoul's elite pretending charity was about more than tax deductions and social positioning. Nola took her seat in the front row, center. Not hidden in the back, not standing to the side. Front row, where the twins could see her, where they could know she hadn't left. Jae-min entered late, scanning the room until he found them. Nola expected him to take the seat beside her, the position of authority, of control. Instead, he stood behind her chair, not hovering, not looming, just present. Supporting without centering himself. The twins took the stage, their small figures dwarfed by the grand piano. They found Nola's face in the crowd. She smiled, nodded. They began to play. The piece wasn't perfect. Ji-woo rushed the tempo in places. Min Seo missed a note in the second movement. But they played with confidence, with joy, with the knowledge that someone who loved them was watching. When they finished, the room erupted in polite applause. But the twins only cared about one person's reaction. Nola stood, clapping with pride shining in her eyes. Behind her, Jae-min clapped too. Not for the performance, though it was lovely, but for the woman who'd made it possible, who'd kept a promise he'd broken, who'd come back not because she had to, but because she chose to. That night, after the twins were asleep, Nola found Jae-min in his study. "They did well today," he said. "They did." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with things unsaid. "I don't forgive you yet," Nola said finally. "I'm not sure I ever fully will." Jae-min nodded. "I understand. But I see you trying. I see the changes, and that—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "That matters. It's the least I can do. It's more than most would do." She turned to leave, then stopped. "They love you, you know, the twins. They're angry and hurt, but they love you. That's why this hurts so much." "I know." "Don't waste it," Nola said quietly. "Don't waste their love by going back to who you were." "I won't." She left him sitting there, surrounded by the trappings of power that had nearly cost him everything that mattered. Some gates never open the same way again. Some families are built on blood and name. Others are rebuilt in the spaces between failure and redemption, between authority and respect, between the power to command and the wisdom to kneel. The Kang household would never be what it was. But perhaps, Nola thought as she checked the twins' windows one final time before bed, it could become something better. Something honest, something whole. Not because forgiveness was given freely, but because change was earned, one careful, conscious choice at a time. Thanks so much, my dear friends, for enjoying this beautiful story till this end. If you've not subscribed, kindly subscribe now to be notified when we drop our next story. Also, like the video and comment where you are watching from and what time it's at your end. Thank you.